to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
Greetings and welcome to the March on Washington Film Festival. I'm Isis Arabe, Artistic Director. As always, we begin by acknowledging the source of all life and the 7 directions, north, south, east, west, above, below, and within, and to the cycle of life of African ancestor people, those who've gone on before, those living and those yet to be born. Because they were, we are. Because we are, they will be. Our theme, Who Tells the Story, is inspired by the African proverb, until the lion learns to write, tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. We are lifting up the authentic and denied voices of history, unpacking the distortions that have been told, and opening space for each of us to be self-determined in telling our own story. When we doubt that our solo effort can make a difference, there are numerous examples to draw from. This festival celebrates many of them, but one story that is very little known is that of Nichelle Nichols. Of course, many of us remember her from the Star Trek original TV series and films, but I'm sure I'm not alone in wondering if she could do anything more than sit at that comms desk looking cute and repeating the same few lines. Well, she could, and she did, in a way that has had a profound effect on the field she portrayed on screen, outer space. With us to lead this conversation on this under-regarded woman and to introduce our panelists is Kat Calvin. Kat is a social entrepreneur, a writer, a podcaster, an attorney, founder of Spread the Vote, and co-founder of Project ID Action Fund. Included on the various notable lists in Time Magazine, Fast Company, and Griot.com, and featured on BET and MSNBC, she is a 2019 Roddenberry Foundation Fellow and an avid fan of Star Trek lore. Please welcome Kat Calvin. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. It's all yours.
Well, Thank you so much for having me. I'm so beyond thrilled to be moderating this panel. It is probably the only thing that's kept me going for the last several weeks. I am a huge Star Trek fan. I have admired Gene Roddenberry and his vision and his courage and what he built for most of my life. And Nichelle Nichols has been my hero forever. She and Mae Jemison are two women who I have loved and admired since I was a little girl, and who make me feel guilty every day that I didn't become an astronaut, which is the coolest thing you can possibly be. And yet somehow I am not that thing. I'm just not cool enough. But to be here and to be talking about this incredible piece of history, and this really critical piece of history that so many people don't know about, the impact that Nichelle Nichols had on the entire space program, and all of the things beyond that, on encouraging young people of color to get into the sciences and engineering, and to give us the heroes that we have today, like Mae Jemison, is a thrill. This documentary, I cried through most of it. I kept crying every 5 minutes. I was bawling again. It was incredible, and it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be representing the Roddenberry Foundation, which is the foundation named after the great man himself, Gene Roddenberry. And I am really excited to introduce our panelists, who are extraordinary people, and to have a really good conversation, hopefully, about Nichelle Nichols and NASA and the incredibly powerful part that culture plays in determining our future. So to start, I'd like to introduce Todd Thompson, who is the director and producer of this incredible documentary. Todd, hi, how are you?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm great. Can you introduce?
I owe you a box of Kleenex, I think.
You owe me several boxes of Kleenex, and I have mascara all over one of my shirts.
We'll get a care package your way immediately.
Wonderful. Can you introduce yourself? Tell everybody a little bit about you.
Well, my name's Todd Thompson. I grew up a Star Wars kid, to be honest. I got into movies because my dad took me to see Star Wars when I was 7, and I just, from that point on, was just hooked, I guess, you know. And ironically, in making Woman in Motion, we got to do our final sound mix and everything at Skywalker Ranch. So I sort of came around full circle on this film. But I've just, I've been a storyteller since I was a kid. Grew up in the Spielberg era, if you will, and just enjoying good quality stories. And that really stuck with me. And then I spent 21 years with Disney. I was a director and producer with the Walt Disney Company, doing commercials and things like that. So I've always, I guess, had instilled in me just a sense of good storytelling, good quality storytelling, maybe not necessarily family entertainment, but, creative and ideas that leave the world in a better place, if that makes any sense.
Amazing. Well, you've certainly done it with this documentary. I can't wait to talk about it, but I do want to introduce our next guest. I'm so excited. It's a real life astronaut, greatest people in the world. Jose Hernandez, hello.
Hello, how you doing, Kat? Very happy to be here for this Woman in Motion event, and thank you very much for the invitation. And I've always been a Star Trek fan because I'm old enough to remember when it first came out, first run, and so that's had a lot to do with how I grew up, as you can imagine.
That's incredible. And Jose, can you tell everyone just a little bit about yourself and your career?
Sure thing. Well, I'm a first-generation Mexican-American. My parents were migrant farm workers. As a matter of fact, I was a migrant farm worker. So if you can imagine a family that traveled three places in California for 9 months and then going back to Mexico for 3 months, that was our family. And the only reason I was born here in the U.S. was because I was born during the harvest months. I have brothers and sisters born in Mexico, and when I was watching Star Trek and then watching the very last Apollo mission, Apollo 17 on TV, I mean, those were the milestones that basically inspired me to become an astronaut. And I was fortunate enough to, after 11 rejections, being accepted to the 19th class of astronauts, flew as the flight engineer on STS-128 aboard Space Shuttle Discovery on August of 2009 to the International Space Station. So I've had the fortune of actually being up in space and doing what Nichelle Nichols was doing on Star Trek in real life as the flight engineer.
Well, you have lived my greatest dream, but maybe if you were rejected 11 times, I'll just keep applying to NASA and eventually they'll let me in. Well, I want to round out this panel with an incredible woman who runs an organization that I have loved and admired for many, many years, Reshma Saujani, who is the founder of Girls Who Code, which is it's such a great organization. Google it right away. Give them all your money. They're really extraordinary. Hi, Reshma. How are you?
Hi, how are you? It's so great to be here with such incredible people. So I guess a little bit about me. I started an organization called Girls Who Code to teach girls to computer program. I'm kind of a weird person to have done it because I majored in speech communications and poli-sci. I wasn't a Star Trek geek. But my parents came to this country as refugees from Uganda in 1970. And one of the only reasons why they got status to come here was because they were both engineers. And so I, from a very young age, my father would sit me on the dinner table and he'd say, "What's 2 + 2?" And I would say 5. And he'd be like, "Ah." But I got it in my head like really early that I wasn't good at math or science. But I was always passionate about change. I grew up as one of the few Indian kids in a very white neighborhood. I led my first march when I was 13 years old, and I haven't stopped marching since. And in 2012, I ran for United States Congress as the first South Asian woman to run. I failed miserably. Jose, I'm right up there with you in terms of like my passion for trying and failing. But as part of that experience, I would go into computer science classes in New York City. And I would see lines and lines and lines of boys, not a girl in sight and not a girl of color in sight. And so I got an idea to teach girls to code. And part of it was because I just didn't understand where they were and why we weren't part of this industry that was growing and shaping and changing. And so almost a decade later, we've taught 300,000 girls and over 500 million. Half the girls we've served are Black and Latinx. And half the girls we serve are under the poverty line. So racial diversity, equity is a core part of who we are and who we've always been. So I'm excited to be here and loved learning more about Nichelle. And I can't wait to tell my girls about her.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you and to talk a little bit more about girls in STEM. But Todd, let's start with you because, I love Nichelle Nichols. I've always loved Nichelle Nichols. I fantasize about being a hura. Thought I knew everything there was to know about her. And I actually didn't know this history of Nichelle doing this recruitment for this program. Can you talk a little bit about how you found this story and what inspired you to tell it?
Yeah, so I'm involved in several projects, and one of my producing partners is heavily involved with NASA, as is his associate, his friend, Dave Teague. So, it's really as simple as I got a phone call one day. It was November of 2014. I remember that specifically. And it was, it wasn't one of those, would you like to do a story? It was, we're going to do a story. And so I really didn't have a choice in the matter. But it really didn't take much convincing because, I love Star Trek. And, of course, I was familiar with Nichelle. But again, I really, when Tim and Dave told me the story, just those, I look for certain elements, when a story comes my way, it had all the elements that I look for in something that I feel would make a really great, motion picture. And so I was on board immediately. It took me no convincing whatsoever.
Well, I'm glad you were. Jose, man living my dream. Nichelle Nichols, obviously this whole thing is about how hard she worked to open the world of NASA to people of color. You came along a bit later after this whole program. Did you, when you were at NASA or now, do you feel like what she did contributed to the legacy of making it possible for you to eventually become an astronaut?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know when I was a kid, when Star Trek was the first run series, and I watched, Lieutenant Uhura on TV. And looking at what Gene Roddenberry did with respect to having a very diverse crew was that he and also Nichelle Nichols gave us a license to dream because it sort of empowered us to believe that we can see ourselves we can see ourselves in that in those positions because we were seeing it on TV. And so having seen that is what really inspired me to say I can see myself there, and what empowered me to move forward.
That's incredible. And so, Reshma, I mean, speaking of that license to dream, you know, I always grew up in, you know, Mae Jemison was the first Black woman in space, and it was right around when I was a kid. And that was just this incredible thing. And I knew I wanted to be the first at something. I also loved Maria Tall Chief Any Woman, who was the first doing something. But we've had these incredible heroes. Nichelle, you know, we saw in the documentary the very famous story about how she wanted to quit, and Dr. King said, you don't understand the impact you're having, you don't understand how important you are. And I feel like, you know, there were so many other women, Sally Ride and all these incredible women who were heroes in STEM, maybe in the 70s and 80s. Who are the heroes that girls in STEM are looking up to now in the sciences? Who do they have to give them that license to dream?
Yeah, it's so powerful, Kay, right? Because, you know, as Marian Wright Edelman said, you cannot be what you cannot see. And it's our motto at Girls Who Code. And I think, unfortunately, so many girls, when they in STEM, what do they see? They have a Barbie doll that says, I hate math, let's go shopping instead. You know, in culture, we had Revenge of the Nerds and War Games and HBO Silicon Valley, right? It's like a white dude wearing a hoodie sitting in a basement somewhere drinking a Red Bull. And girls of color, when they look at those images, they don't see themselves. And so when I think about who our role models are at Girls Who Code, there are women like Ayanna Howard and Katherine Johnson. I mean, Hidden Figures was so powerful because everybody knew Katherine Johnson's story after that. And they too had dreams, you know, of being a computer programmer and working at NASA and being involved in that future innovation. So it's so important. One of the things that we started doing and working with different governors of states was we started doing these women in tech posters. So if you walked into a computer science classroom, you know, in Alabama or in Oakland, California, and you were a young girl of color, and when you, again, think about a computer scientist, you don't see yourself. Now you see Katherine Johnson or Ayanna Howard, right? Or Nichelle Nichols. And you hear about her journey and you read about her. So we've been making a huge, huge push to have those stories, have those posters, right? These women in tech spotlights to tell these journeys so women also can dream big too and see themselves and see these dreams as possible.
I love that. I would like to buy all of those posters, please, and put them up in my room. And you guys are allowing me to segue perfectly because, Todd, my next question is for you. You know, Gene Roddenberry was a total badass, and he was determined to put diversity on screen. He actually, before Star Trek, was fired from a show because it was about a Mississippi riverboat, and they refused to put any Black people in the show. And he was like, you can't have a Mississippi riverboat without Black people. And he kept fighting them until they fired him. So he's like, fine, I'll just make my own show. And along came Star Trek. And, you know, obviously we have seen in so many ways the massive cultural impact that had. And yet now we're talking about Hidden Figures. You know, what can modern day culture creators learn from Gene Roddenberry, from Nichelle Nichols, about their responsibility and opportunity to impact culture and to impact the world with the culture that they're making?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I missed a part of that. Sorry.
Yeah, just what can modern day creators of film, music, art, culture learn from Gene Roddenberry and Star Trek and Nichelle Nichols about the impact that they can have in the world?
Well, I mean, some of them are really obvious. I mean, you know, Gene, like to your point, it's just amazing. Like he was obviously somebody who was very in tune with equality and just really just viewed everybody as human beings, which is, you know, how else should we view everybody? It's kind of obvious, you know. And so, you know, he took, you know, whereas he got shut down in some of these other shows you're referencing, you know, he got this brilliant idea to get his messages across in a show that's set, you know, hundreds of years in the future. And it was really quite a brilliant decision. And I think, you know, I mean, I as a filmmaker, I personally feel like we have a responsibility to, you know, if you have the talent, if God gives you the talent to like write a book or become a musician, or in my case, become a filmmaker, I feel like we have a responsibility to produce art that, again, makes the world a better place. And so regardless of what your talents are, what your contributions are to the world, we should always, you know, keep that top of mind. And I think, you know, with film in particular, it's a great way to just inspire. And, you know, somebody had said it earlier, I think it was you, Kat, you know, the fact, or no, I'm sorry, it was Reshma. You said, out of sight, out of mind. Like by visually putting things out there and making people see that and be able to relate to it. I think it's a very powerful tool. And so yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities, with regards to art to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jose, I have a question. It's just for me because I would make a career change. How does someone actually become an astronaut?
Oh wow, it's a pretty drawn out process, but let me try and explain it the best I can. Is one of the things that they require obviously is that you're in a STEM related career, science, technology, engineering, and math, and that you have a few years experience, preferably in the aerospace industry. And then after that, when they make a call for astronauts, more than 18,000 qualified applicants apply. Out of those 18,000, NASA will down select to 100 what we call semifinalists, because these 100 will come in 5 groups of 20 to NASA, and they'll go through a week-long process where they take some tests for aptitude. They take a physical test, of course. They take psychological tests, and then they do interviews. Out of those 100, what will happen is NASA will select 10 to 15 successful candidates to become astronaut candidates who will train for 2 years before actually becoming astronauts. And so this is why it took me 11 tries. It wasn't until my 12th try, because the competition is just so stiff. 18,000 qualified for 10 to 15 positions. So it's really a difficult journey, but not impossible.
All right, well, my new goal now is to be the oldest person in space, because I'm going to need like 40 years to make that happen, but I will get there.
I got selected when I was 42, so as long as you're in good physical shape, you can get selected.
You know what, Jose? We could end this panel now. That's all I needed to hear. But Reshma, I do have a question. So one of the things that really surprised me about this documentary is how much NASA really wanted to diversify, and they really cared, and they were willing to put their money where their mouth was, and say, hey, we know we have this problem. We can't figure out why. Let's fix it. And I feel like that's something that's rare, right? These days, when you get sort of diversity initiatives or whatever, they're very surface. Like, you don't have a lot of companies that are doing what NASA did. And it really struck me and really impressed me. Can you tell me a little bit about what you think contemporary businesses can learn from NASA's actions?
Yeah, I'm curious, Jose, out of that 100, how many were women and people of color?
Let's see. Well, each time I was in the final group of 100 3 times. The third time I got selected, and when we were in groups of 20, I would have to say about 4 were women out of 20, and probably about 6 or 7 were people of color. So. Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to ask that question because I think that, look, I mean, it was fairly recently that NASA realized that they didn't have enough spacesuits, right, for women. And that was a huge, huge issue. And so, look, I think that Silicon Valley, interestingly, kind of says the same thing. We really care about it. We want to change it. We want to make a difference. But then when you actually look at the numbers, it's really slow change. And, one of the things I think you've seen after this kind of moment we're in after George Floyd's murder and the racial, injustice that's happening everywhere is that people are looking more closely. And I think that they're asking for more accountability. And so for me, I don't think accountability changes until you have a metric, until NASA says 100 of those seats, half will be women, half will be people, or whatever, half will be people of color, whatever the number is that we set out that we think is the right number. Because until then, I think we still have this narrative, and we had this narrative, in tech, is that, well, I just can't find them. We want to hire them, but I just can't find them. We talk about it as if it's a pipeline issue, as if there aren't enough excellence. And we know that that's not true. And what's interesting at Girls Who Code is, as girls, and we've taught 300,000 girls, so I've 30,000 college graduates majoring in computer science right now. Half of them are Black and Latina. And a couple of years ago, I just started getting more and more like emails from my students. Miss Saujani, I have a 4.0 at MIT, Stanford. I'm Black. And I just interviewed at X company and I didn't get an internship. And I started making a list. And when Reshma makes a list, it's not good for anybody. But it became clear to me that it's not a pipeline problem. It's a culture problem. It's when women and people of color go to actually interview, there's still an enormous amount of discrimination, both intentional and unintentional in the hiring process and in the selection process. And we hide behind it and we talk about it in terms of people aren't prepared or they're not ready or they don't have the right skills. And we know that that's not true. So, what I have really been pushing for in technology and in the Valley is set a number. Set a goal and reach it in the same way that many colleges reach recruit for their football teams. They go around the country, they find the talent, they give them the resource, they bring them in. Like, we can do this. The talent is there, but is the will there? And that's the question that I keep asking. And sorry, one last thing. I think NASA, similar to other industries, it's when an institution is built without us, when they're built without women and people of color, it's really hard to change. Really hard to change. And so
it's a slow process because what happens is that people have a tendency, like you said, it's subconsciously done. People have a tendency to hire people that look like them. They feel comfortable with them. And it's only when you take a risk and say, okay, this person doesn't look like me, doesn't have the, didn't come from the same background, I'm not sure I should give them a chance or her a chance. And when they do, then they're pleasantly surprised at how well they do. And now you have a chance to start bringing someone up the ranks where they get in a position where they can hire people like themselves too. And you start creating that diversified, but it's a slow
process.
Process, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think that's a great note, and we should just, make it a law. But I know, incredible thought. Todd, you've made this incredible documentary. It made me cry a lot. I'm gonna watch it over and over again, constantly, for years to come. What are your hopes for the outcome of this film?
I mean, really, to be honest with you, I just want as many people as possible to see the film. I mean, because when we were making the film, and we started off at Michelle's house for about a week, and at some point during that time, she said something that just made the hair on my arm stand up, and I just told myself, or I felt anyways, that this is what this film is about. This is the blueprint for what we need to move forward. I mean, as a society, as a people. And so it became really clear, what kind of film I was going to make very early on in the process. And then, but unless no one sees it, then there's, what's the point? So I really just hope that this film gets as wide of a release as possible, and then it's accessible and as many people as possible can see it and become inspired by it, share it, talk about it with their friends. I mean, we set examples in life, and we live by those examples. And, for the more people that get to see, how Michelle lived and what she did post, movie star career, if you will. I mean, I think it's great, because you could be in any walk of life and, or have any vocation in life, and you can make a huge impact. You don't have to be on television. You don't have to be a movie star, an actress, or an actor. You could just be working at the local gas station or Walmart or retail outlet or what have you, and really just make a huge impact on people. And that's really what I want to leave with everybody.
Yeah, amazing. Jose, I have more space questions. You're my first astronaut, so I have a million questions for you about space. What do you actually do when you're up there? I watched, first of all, every space movie ever made. And I love the NASA channel. You could sort of see ISS, but people are just sort of floating around. What are you actually doing when you're in space?
Well, first of all, the trip up there is incredible. It is incredible, Kat, because you go from the launch pad 0 miles per hour to 17,500 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes. It's the best e-ticket ride Disneyland can ever hope to design. And once you're up there, about 300 miles up, you're now in zero G, traveling around the world at that same speed. And so you go around the Earth once every 90 minutes. And at that point, that's when you're floating. You take off your seatbelt, and you're always floating. We docked to the International Space Station. Our mission was the second to last mission to complete the construction of the International Space Station. So we brought over more than 7 tons of equipment and experiments that we installed inside the station and outside the station. We conducted 3 spacewalks, and we also did a crew exchange. We left my female colleague, crewmate, Nicole Stotts, on the International Space Station for a 3-month mission. And then we brought back Tim Copra, who had been up there for 3 months. So those were the 3 objectives: is install 7 tons of equipment, do a crew exchange, and install equipment on the outside portion of the International Space Station via 3 spacewalks. And so we're pretty busy. Every 5 minutes of our time while we're up there is spoken for. And the beauty is that if you're scheduled to finish something in 20 minutes and you finish it in 15, you got 5 minutes to look out the window and enjoy the scenery.
I was wondering like how you can even find time to rest, because even when you have that designated like time, I'd still be like, oh my God, I'm in space. I'm looking out the window. Like I'd be like a kid on an airplane for the first time.
Oh,
like, I don't want to miss a minute.
Yeah, it's beautiful when you look out. I remember the very first time I looked out, Todd. I kid you not. Because I'm the flight engineer, so we went around the Earth once before I can take off my seatbelt, and I took it off. I pushed against the wall, did my best Superman impersonation as I floated down to the mid deck to look at the window and look at Earth from a view less than 600 people have had the privilege to do so from the outside. And we were flying over North America, and it just hit me right there and then, because I was able to see Canada, the US, Mexico. And what struck me as beautiful is I couldn't tell where Canada ended and the US began. I couldn't tell where the US ended and Mexico began. And I told myself, my gosh, I had to go way up here to realize that down there we're just one, that that borders are human-made concepts designed to separate us. And how sad, because from up here, man, we look like one.
Oh, yeah, that's an exact moment in the film. I mean, Fred Gregory said the exact same thing, and it's one of my favorite parts of the film, actually, when he describes going up to space and what he saw and what he experienced and how he felt. And
it changes you. It changes you, Doc.
Yeah, you wish more people could experience that.
So powerful.
It's so amazing. So incredible. Reshma. So I didn't know. There's so many things I didn't know about Nichelle Nichols. I'm a sad fan because I'm realizing, oh my gosh, there are a million things I just learned in this documentary. And I didn't realize that she was one of the first women to run a STEM education organization in America. You now are following in that legacy. What does the world of STEM education and girl STEM education look like today?
Yeah, it's why she's so much more amazing, right? This idea of that, like, she had that legacy and then she wanted to pay it forward, right? And give other young women the same opportunity. And it's kind of, it's like you were talking about, Todd. It's like, that's a special kind of human who wants to give that gift back. I think that we have a tremendous opportunity and a tremendous obligation. I think especially post health crisis, right? You have millions of kids who are, don't have access to technology, don't have access to Wi-Fi, are learning in a Burger King parking lot, who are, New York Times called it like a generation that's going to be left behind. And for me, growing up as the daughter of refugees, like the idea of like marching into the middle class, I think, Jose, you have this also similar powerful background, was everything. It's how your life changed for you and your family. And I think that STEM, an opportunity to get a STEM education, gives you that shot to march into the middle class. And it's more important than ever because we realize that, whether it's some families don't have a device at home or don't have Wi-Fi, that we're making it even harder for our kids to learn and to get access to technology. So we need to continue to commit to STEM education and commit to making sure that every single child, I think, knows how to computer program, knows how to problem solve, has a background in technology because, as President Obama said, the last jobs to go will be the humans telling the computers what to do. And I think that that's true.
That's true and so terrifying. So quick reminder for all of you who are watching live, please put in your questions on Facebook. We are happy to answer them. We've got a few minutes left, so toss in your questions. If not, I'm just going to ask Jose more questions about what it's like.
We should help Pat just fill out a NASA application for the rest of the time.
Yeah, actually, Todd, I love where you're going with this. And so, Todd, we did have a question from Facebook.
Yeah.
When and where will people be able to see this movie? When is it going to be released?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Woman in Motion, I'm actually very excited to say we did get picked up for North American distribution, and the film is going to be released theatrically at first, February of 2021, and then it'll go to streaming and downloading and whatnot from there. And then I believe Blu-ray and DVD comes out sometime second quarter, like March, April or May, something like that. But yeah, it's coming out. I'm really, really happy, and I just thank God every day for that. Because again, my goal for making it was to share it with the world, and so 2021 is the year.
I love
2020 first, but
I love your optimism that we'll be in movie theaters in 2021. And
it'll be a reason to go back.
So I have to ask Todd, what did Nichelle Nichols think of the movie? And you can lie if she hated it. You can tell us she liked it.
No. Okay. Well, to be very honest with you, she hasn't seen it yet. To be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, we're saving it for her, and I'm saving it for a very special moment to share it with her. But we stay in touch, and she's up to date on everything, of course, as a co-producer. But we've been saving the final cut for her to see, so we can all be together.
Oh my gosh, that's so nerve-wracking.
Yeah. There's been many times where I'm like, let's just show it to her. Come on, let's just show it. And we're holding out. So.
Okay, well, I'm gonna email you in like 6 months and be like, what did she think? Awesome. So Jose, I wanted to. We have someone from the chat saying she will love it, all caps. So I think you're safe.
Her son's seen it, and so we have the family blessing, so to speak. But we've just been saving it for her, a very special moment.
Good. I'm a little bit nervous now.
Yeah.
So Jose, can you talk a little bit just about? I know you're into. You're doing a lot of really interesting things now, sort of post NASA, and sort of what First, I'm going to be the oldest person in space. Obviously, this is decided. But then after that, I have to do something. And so, sort of talk a little bit about what life looks like when you touch back down and you're back home from space.
Well, you immediately want to go back. Your first trip up there, you want to go back. And unfortunately, when I landed, they announced the retirement of the space shuttle fleet. And so we only had 4 more missions, and they were already assigned. So I knew I wasn't going to get to fly on another space shuttle mission. And then I studied how long it was going to take for a new vehicle to come on board, and it's 9 to 10 years. And I did the math. I said, man, I'm going to be too old by then. And so the only way to go back to space was to go with the Russians on the Russian Soyuz. That involved basically a 4-year commitment where you train for 3 years, 80% of the time in Russia, because you're going on a Russian Soyuz capsule. And then you're up there for 3-6 months, and then you come back and you're on travel for another 3-6 months. And like a good Catholic, I have 5 kids, and my oldest was 15, and then I had a 13 and a 10, 9, 8. And so it was getting to the point of our lives where it was more important to be a parent and be around and not be gone. My wife had been doing the heavy lifting up to this point. I thought it would be unfair. So unfortunately, I picked leaving NASA and starting my own business over another space trip. It was the hardest decision I ever made. But I think as Latinos, family always comes first. And I decided to focus on the family. And that's why, if I were able to go back again right now in a heartbeat, because my kids are big now, most of them are graduated from college, but I would love to go back.
That's amazing. Well, who knows? Everybody's working on commercial space flight. Maybe it'll happen.
Yeah, and like Reshma, you know, I have a foundation. It's called Reaching for the Stars. Where here in the Central Valley of California, our goal is to increase the pipeline of minorities and women entering the STEM field. So it's reaching for the Jose Hernandez, Reaching for the Stars. And like Reshma, in 2012, I ran for Congress in the 10th Congressional District. The only mistake I made was listening to my party of not running in my home district, but a district that was an incumbent from another party, and they were favored in terms of registration, 12 percentage points, and we only lost by 1.5%. So Reshma, you and I got to run again. So
we got to run again.
That's all there is to it.
You run again on a platform of letting slightly older people go to space. You'll have a contribution.
There you go. Absolutely.
Reshma, actually, so I have a question for you because I don't know a lot of children or young people, which is very sad. And so I have no idea what the kids are into these days. And so when I, think about your incredible girls and they're learning to code and they're going to amazing schools, what are the careers that they're looking forward to? Please say I want to be astronauts. If they don't, it's okay. But what is it that they're seeing and they're like, oh, I really want to do X thing?
Look, I think that girls, especially now, they're change makers. Like if you think about every single movement that's been happened over the past couple of years, whether it's climate change, Black Lives Matter, right, gun reform, it's been led by kids. And we're kind of living at this crazy time where our children are behaving like leaders and our leaders are behaving like children. So when I meet like 14, 15, 16-year-old girls and boys, they're thinking about like building something or creating something to make the world better. I just had a student who built, an organization called Makers for COVID-19. And so she started 3D printing, PPE equipment, 16, 17 years old. I had one of my students build a tool, a microchip, where if you put it in a gun and it goes off in an area like a school, it alerts the police because she grew up right in the midst of school shootings. And so when she got to the place to major in engineering at University of Pennsylvania, she's like, what can I build? Youngest woman to get a patent. And so many of my students right now are building tools for BLM. So I think it's like they're constantly thinking about the world. They recognize that it's a mess and they recognize that it's up to them to kind of heal us. And so I think that that's their vantage point when it comes to technology. And I think there's so many cool things happening. I just recently invested in these women that are looking at waste, in neighborhoods in Boston to figure out the concentration of COVID. And they were doing this for the opioid epidemic. So I think that we're going to see a lot of innovations, a lot of tools, a lot of things being created to make our world better. And it's going to come from that generation.
I love it. I'm so excited. I hope we make it to that future because I want to see it. I may be in space during that future, so we'll see. I have a question for all of you that came from Facebook. What are your favorite film and TV series about space for kids?
Space for kids.
Well, for small kids, that's easy. For me, it was the Jetsons.
Yes.
Can't forget about the Jetsons. And for the teenage kids, it was Lost in Space.
I was gonna say, Lost. I just grew up on Lost in Space. I guess.
There's a new Lost in Space on Netflix if you want an updated version.
Oh yes,
my son and I watched that. We love that. The reboot was really good. I own the original. I still watch it to this day. So.
I love the Netflix series Away right now. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
I binge watched it. It was fantastic.
Really good. Yeah. And there's I'm gonna throw in A Wrinkle in Time, which is a book I read when I was very, very young that got me into sci-fi in the first place. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And then Ava DuVernay made a really beautiful movie. It's all about space and physics. Weirdly, it makes physics interesting for children. Awesome. So Todd, I want to ask you sort of a technical question, or maybe less technical, but procedural. But, it's always interesting watching documentaries, and you have all of this footage and you talked to all of these people, and it's such a sort of complicated thing to put together. Can you talk a little bit about just what it's like to make a documentary and how long it took to make this one and how you put it all together?
Yeah, well, I mean, the funny thing is I never really thought of myself as a documentary filmmaker, but I find myself now making about 4 of them, so it's kind of funny. But I love documentaries. They've kind of become my favorite go-to entertainment these days. There's just so many interesting topics and subjects out there, and with services like Netflix and Hulu, there's just an abundance of them, which is so great. I love it. And as far as the process, I mean, I really approached it very much like I would approach a traditional dramatic feature film, if you will, which would be scripted. So we started with a story. I mean, we got very familiar with the story. Nichelle published a 400-page NASA report, part of which you can actually access and download on the website womaninmotion.com, the movie. We started with that and really just built a story structure, what Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 was going to be all about. And as we got into the details of it and figured out all the different story beats, we really crafted our questions around that because, we had a limited budget for the film, and we weren't in a position where, nor did I have interest to spend 10 years on the road just gathering content and hours and hours and hours of footage that one day I would sit down and edit. I wanted to go in and specifically know what I was asking and who we were going to get that information from. And, we had some roadblocks along the way. We had a lot of trouble finding people that were still alive that actually worked with her in the 70s and helped her with her campaign. It wasn't until the 11th hour that we were fortunate enough to meet Carrie Joels, and he filled in a lot of blanks and worked side by side with her along the way. So he was a godsend, to be honest. So the film itself, to answer your question, took about 5 years to make for various different reasons. But and what was funny is, we wanted to get it done when I was first pitched the idea or told we were making this movie, we were going to get it done in time for the Star Trek 50th. And then that deadline kind of came and went. And then we were aiming for a second deadline and whatnot. And I quickly kind of surrendered to just letting it take its course, and whether it took 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever. And the blessing in that is certain things start to unfold and reveal themselves over time that, we wouldn't have had we finished early or maybe originally as originally planned. So you kind of have to understand and be open to the fact that, it's in God's hands. And as long as you keep your hands on the wheel and steer the ship and make sure, you're getting what you need, that everything else will kind of fall into place.
Yeah. Amazing. Reshma, so for anyone who is watching this and they've all of a sudden realized oh my gosh, I have to get into coding, or I have a girl who should, how do people get involved in Girls Who Code, and what is the program actually look like?
Yeah, so all our programs are free. So first, we run free virtual summer immersion programs for rising juniors and seniors that happen over the summer that are sponsored by companies. Last summer, we used to run them in person in places like Facebook and Microsoft and Sephora. So you knew what it was like to work at a technology company. But after COVID, those programs are virtual and they're awesome. And basically in those 2 weeks, you learn how to computer program, and then you build what we call an activist toolkit. Then we have 10,000 Girls Who Code clubs across the country. So there's a club in every town, county, and parish. And so go on our Girls Who Code website to check those out. And then we have Girls Who Code loops, which are like clubs essentially on college campuses. We have about 150 of those because we have alumni all across. And our goal, because the attrition rate for women and for people of color in STEM in college is much higher, obviously, because there isn't a sense of diversity oftentimes in these departments, and that pushes people out. And so we want to build sisterhood and build community. So go to our website. All of our programs are free, and it'll change your life.
Yay, amazing. I did not realize you guys were up to 10,000 clubs. That's so awesome. Well done. So Todd, we had another question from the interwebs. I love this question. People always ask it, and it's always great hearing the answer. What is a producer?
A producer is somebody who makes it happen. They're, it's a project manager, somebody who gathers all the pieces and parts that are necessary to get the job done, whether it's cast or financing or crew, scheduling. I mean, you name it. It's the person that really kind of drives the ship and makes sure we stay on task and works very closely with the director. In this case, you know, I was director and producer, and I had other producing partners. But yeah, the role of the producer is a very important role. A lot of projects start with the producer and go from there. So
awesome, thank you.
yeah.
All right, so we just have a few minutes to close out. So if you have internet questions, now is the time. Toss them at me. While we are seeing if that is coming up, though, I would love for each of you to go around. We'll start with Todd, Jose, Reshma, because that is the order you are in my screen. No other reason. If you can just sort of close out, what is it that Nichelle Nichols means to you, this story, and just sort of last words of what you want people to take away from this conversation and from the film.
Well, I mean, for me personally, you know, I just walked away I was extremely humbled, first of all, to be telling this story, and so gracious that I had the chance to do so. And yeah, I just walked away with a whole new appreciation for Star Trek, and just a total different, you know, love affair for Nichelle. I mean, she's just a beautiful woman inside and out. And just a pleasure to be around. And she's a force of nature, and yet extremely approachable and extremely sweet. And I just hope that, you know, through this film, other people get to know her the way I did, and really appreciate what she did for us and for the world.
Jose, how about you?
Try to top that, Jose. No.
All right. Well, first of all, hey, I was an adolescent, so you know I had a crush on Nichelle when I was watching her on.
Everyone says that. Everyone says that.
And, yeah, everybody had a crush. I was no different. You know, it's I'll fess up to that. But more importantly, I loved how gracious she was in the flight deck, in the sense that whenever there was a presence around her, you know, it kind of like the whole quality of the show and everything went up a notch in terms of, you know, you almost felt like you moved into the high rent district when she was in her presence. And so she did a lot in that sense, and in portraying herself very professional, and more than anything, empowering us folks of color that, you know, we can aspire to positions like that. Even this show was portrayed as a few hundred years into the future. You know, it kind of gave us a glimpse of what the future was going to be like. And we know it already that it is happening. And Reshma, I agree with you, it's happening too slow. We need to speed it up, but it's happening. You just have to look at the fact that our next lunar mission is going to have a woman step on the moon. And that has a lot to do with the folks like Nichelle Nichols of the world that has been able to make that happen. So kudos to her, and I wish her well, and she keeps working hard and inspiring all of us, because she certainly inspired me. There you go, Todd. Boom.
That was good. I gotta say that was good.
All right, Reshma, close it out.
I fully agree.
Yeah, I mean, that both well said. I mean, I'm also just so grateful to her, because it's not easy to be the first. And there are probably so many things that have happened to her, and indignities she had to suffer, and moments where she had to keep going. I mean, Jose, same to you. It's not easy being the first person of color, like in spaces and places where you are sometimes the only one. But because of you and because of her, right, there's so many young people right now who are like, I can be an astronaut. And, you know, I also just want to thank you to Todd. I'm always grateful to people who are telling the stories of the forgotten, because it has such, I mean, I believe that's the only way things change, that's how you change culture, is by storytelling. And it makes a huge, huge difference. So thank you.
Well, thank you, all of you, for the incredible work you do. Thank you, Reshma, for running an amazing organization. And Jose, just thank you for being an astronaut, which is the only thing you ever have to do. You're cool in my book forever. And Todd, for making this incredible movie. I also want to thank our incredible ASL interpreter, who's just been here, just working hard, rocking it. Thank you so much. Thank yourself. And I'm
Wow.
Film Festival for showing this film, for allowing me to moderate, and mostly thank you to Nichelle Nichols for being a hero and a badass, classy woman. I love you, and thank you so much for everything you did. And we'll wrap it up. Thanks so much.
Well, on behalf of the entire film crew, just thank you for having us.
Thank you.
This has been so much fun. It's been our pleasure. Thank you so much I just learned so much, and half the time I spent my imagination up in the stars. So we really appreciate you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
What better time than now to be inspired to set our sights to the heavens and achieve far more than we can conceive. My thanks to all of our panelists. Live long and prosper. Be sure to check out all of our films, discussions, and companion resources. We have a tab in the resource education area called Do Something, which lists all of the organizations that our festival speakers run throughout the festival. It's a way to take words into action at a time when we need citizen activists. There's so much content to explore. We've decided to extend our festival access to the films and discussions for another week. Most of our films and all of our discussions and resources will be available until October 4th. And so until next time, march on.
Well, no, somebody's calling.